welcome to another episode of Lexitecture, a podcast about words by word nerds and for you. My name is Ryan, and in each episode, my friend Amy and I will be talking about our two favorite words of the week, looking at their origins and history, and generally chatting about how they got to where they are today. If that sounds like your cup of tea, come along for the ride and let's explore the weird and wonderful world of the English language. Today's episode, Etymology. So once again, alert listeners will realize right off the bat that there's only one voice here, and that's mine. The collection of jerks known as technical difficulties have reared their ugly heads again and separated the transatlantic connection between Amy and I this week. So it's just me. We should hopefully be getting back to the normal routine next week and henceforth, but as we learned last time, sometimes these things can't be helped, and we'd rather have something out for you guys to listen to and hopefully enjoy rather than nothing. So, onward and upward. Today I decided, just because I thought it'd be fun, to look at the etymology of the word etymology. And because I'm by myself, nobody can tell me not to do it. So, the Oxford English Dictionary, the venerable OED that we so frequently cite, and for good reason, has the number one definition of etymology as the facts relating to the origin of a particular word or the historical development of its form and meaning, or just the origin of a particular word. Definition 2a in the OED is the process or practice of tracing the origin of a word so as to explain what is considered to be its true literal meaning. And this is more of a historical understanding of etymology, and it's rare now, and has been rare for some time. However, that meaning is what etymology used to be thought of as. It used to be thought of as not so much tracing its history as finding out what the word, quote-unquote, really meant. And presumably then, evolutions in the word's meaning would be counted as divergences from the actual meaning of the word, which is kind of a strange way to think about it, but that's what it used to be. And that's reflected in the actual construction of the word. So etymology is borrowed first from French and Latin before that, but the logy, the logy in etymology ending, will kind of give it away as being a Greek word originally. Logy coming from logos, word or writing, and a lot of things have logy at the end of it to indicate the study of in a particular field, so biology, anthropology, all that kind of stuff. And so the study part is there and is great. The first part, the etym, or etymo part, comes from etymon, which is a word in itself that means a previous meaning of a word. So like as one of the steps in the stepping stone path that got a word from A to B. But etymon comes from, it is a form of etymos, which is an ancient Greek word meaning true or real. So the idea is that etymology literally means the study of the truth or reality. And so it's not really surprising that originally the word etymology had that sense, kept that sense of uncovering the quote-unquote real meaning of a word. Etymonline.com, which is a great online resource, has a very cool quote from the author Rachel Barney. It's from an issue of Oxford Studies in Ancient Philosophy from 1998. And the article is called Socrates Agonistes, maybe? The Case of the Cratylus Etymologies. And what Rachel says here is as follows, quote, as practiced by Socrates in the Cratylus, etymology involves a claim about the underlying semantic content of the name, what it really means or indicates. This content is taken to have been put there by the ancient name-givers. Giving an etymology is thus a matter of unwrapping or decoding a name to find the message the name-givers have placed inside. I quite like that idea of etymology, even though it's kind of talking about it derisively a little bit, because that's the old understanding, the understanding that that's where the true meaning is. But I like the image of unwrapping and decoding a word, not necessarily to find its true meaning, because meanings change over time, as pretty much every word has in some form or another, but more just to unwrap it and find out what the original meaning was, and then to look at the wrapping and kind of, to stretch the metaphor a little bit, look at the wrapping to see which layers mean what, and where they got placed, and how they got placed, and why they got placed there, and why that word went through the shifts that it did. For a long period, etymology was not really taken super seriously. There weren't a lot of really good historical records out there. It was hard to get them. Not a lot of research was being done with any kind of scrutiny, with any kind of precision. And so it was kind of frowned on. And it was basically what is now called folk etymology, which is just the term for people kind of looking at a word now and then simply drawing their own lines and going, well, that has this in it, so it must mean this. There's a 2006 citation in the OED that talks about the relationship of etymology to folk etymology being similar to the relationship between astronomy and astrology, to give an idea of how the two relate. As an example of folk etymology, I've heard over the years several people complain about the word amen, as in, at the end of someone says a prayer and everyone says amen, or someone says something that you just think is true and everyone bursts out amen, and meaning I agree, and to put a little underscore on it, throw your name into the hat of that sentiment, whatever that sentiment was. But some people do is they look at the word amen, A-M-E-N, and they see the word men in there, and they assume folk etymologically that the construction of the word is the word men with some sort of prefix of a. And they think that this is an indication of patriarchal language, and some sort of oppression of women, and maybe even as far as misogyny. There's no shortage of that, obviously, out there. Language has a lot of things that reflect both the good and bad elements of the societies that use it. But that would be the folk etymological kind of quote-unquote analysis of the word amen. If you look at the etymology of the word amen, you'd trace it back through the centuries and millennia to get to its Hebrew roots, where it meant certainty or truth, and it's a slight alteration of the verb aman, A-M-A-N, is the English transliteration, which means to strengthen or confirm. And so amen literally comes from the Hebrew word just meaning, yeah, I agree, I would like to strengthen and confirm that idea. It doesn't actually have anything to do with it. It's one of these pure coincidental things that the pronunciation of it rhymes with the male pronoun, the plural male pronoun. But that would be the difference between folk etymology and etymology. And so that is, to wrap up my solo rambling spiel for this time around, the history of etymology and how it got from meaning a very precise and fairly narrow view of history and language evolution and change, meaning we need to find the real meaning of this word, which is this calcified idea that there's a little nugget inside, and the word never really means anything else other than what it originally meant. And then the evolution of etymology to what we understand it now as being a more rigorous study of the origin and history of a word, not to determine what it really means, but just to determine what it once meant and to trace what it has meant in the different stages and how it got from A to B, trying to figure out exactly, or as exactly as possible, where A was in the first place. And then, at least for Amy and I on this show, one of the things that we find really interesting is to try to think about why those changes might have happened and what those changes say about the different time periods. And there we fully admit that we're venturing into folk etymology territory, because in a lot of instances it's really hard, if not impossible, to tell why those changes happened. But it's interesting to see how it reflects the societies that were in power at the time and how that went on and what it says about the people that used the words. And so that wraps up this week's episode. Again, apologies for being the only voice you're hearing this time around. Next week, we're hoping to get back to our normal rhythm of having both Amy and I bringing 2 words. So you get the double dose, and we get both of us chatting away, which we think is more interesting, and we assume you do as well. As always, if you enjoyed the show and if you enjoy listening to it, please do tell your friends about it. Leave us a rating and review on iTunes, because that helps people find us and find out about us. You can visit us on Facebook and Twitter at Lexitecture. You can find us online at lexitecture.com. All those places are places you can point your friends to. Like us on Facebook, share the page, share the posts, talk about us to everybody, and we will see you again next week. Goodbye.